What did David Foster Wallace think of Logic Bros? Well, today we are going to hear Wallace speak at length on them. But first, I want to give a eulogy to all the former Logic Bros that were once within us. I know that there are still some people out there who use the objective framing of reality on every little situation because they are so smart. But us others who decided to walk the path of the artist, the shaman, the man, the woman, the individuated individual, had to learn other modalities of consciousness. We had to expand beyond the alphabet and being able to break everything down to something more transcendent or to something more within. And so as we move on with this presentation, I just want you guys to realize that there are so many lost souls out there, and we were once one of them. To become initiated in this landscape of modern knowledge requires us to walk through the fire of logic, walk through the fire of being sucked into a hyper reality of simulacra and information overload. And because many of us didn't have oversight in our education and in our growth by mentors and others, we were just lost in the sauce, taking in anything and everything. And then there is also just the incentive that if you logically follow life and check all the boxes and do the things that you get rewarded until you are finally alone and have to confront yourself, and then you have no idea what to do. And so we are about to hop into the quote, but I have to remind you that Right Conscious is the headquarters of everything related to David Foster Wallace here on YouTube. If you look at the playlist down below, you will find over 100, yes, 100 videos on Wallace's philosophy, his books, and his life. And so let us now hear from Wallace and his logical addiction. I think I had serious problems in my early 20s. I mean, I'd been a really good student. I was a really good logician, semantician, and philosopher. And I really had this problem of thinking I was smarter than everyone else. And I think if you are writing out of a place where you think that you are smarter than everybody else, you are either condescending to the reader or talking down to them or playing games. Or do you think the point is to show how smart you are? And all that happened to me was I just had a bunch of shit happen in my 20s where I realized I wasn't near as smart. Where I realized I wasn't near as smart as I thought I was. And I realized that a lot of other people, including people without much education, were a fuck of a lot smarter than I thought they were. I got, humbled in a way, I think. And what the weird thing is, discovering, I mean, if you see more heart, or I don't know, the prose is prettier, or it's less cold, or whatever. And so there's a lot going on there. But just for my writers out there, in terms of your writing, logic and metaphor, logic and heart have no correspondence outside of the general lifeline and base connection that they have. You can't logic or think your way to writing a masterpiece. It is a process of integrating and becoming through thousands, tens of thousands of hours of practice on the page, but also out in reality, gaining experience and also framing reality. Because the way you frame your novel and the way you write is just a way, or I should say an example of how you frame reality a lot of the time. Many of us approach the page and write our novels through the general framework that we perceive reality through, especially the stronger frames that we view reality through. And this is why the logical types can never be too successful in writing. And when they are, when I will even call them out, William T. Vollmann, who I love, shout out Europe Central, best novel about World War II. But when they aren't in these little zones like World War II, the reason that Europe Central is the best World War II novel is that we are all logic bros about World War II. The reason that many of us became logic bros is that I remember in high school and in the 8th grade, I started to read books, and I was reading, and just consuming information online at school while they were telling me about Algebra 2. I was just reading, and no one else I knew was reading outside of a select few people. And so I was in this vacuum where I felt like there was no one else like me, that nobody else understood. And in that isolation, in that coldness, in that testosterone blossoming era, in our teens and our early 20s, it's very easy to get inundated with doing things with a very singular perception of reality. This is why they make young people join the army. They believe they can get sucked into something. They can see reality in one way. And one of the easiest things to find, especially for more talented or motivated individuals is the logical framing of reality. And I remember one time I had a teacher try to kind of tell me this, but he really didn't do it in the right way. He pulled me aside. He said, Ian, do you really think you're the only person who knows about Eastern philosophy or this and that? Which is like, what a fucking idiot. Like, what an attitude on him. I tell students the same message all the time in a much nicer way. And I said, look around us. These people don't know anything. Of course I feel like that. Find me one other person in this class that knows anything about that, which wasn't the right message or response from me. And to be successful in STEM fields or philosophy, you need that. But once again, when you cultivate that side of logic, it isn't cultivating your artistic side, and it also only serves very few uses in practical reality. Obviously, when you're contemplating life decisions or little various things throughout the day, you use logic, but to turn the frame up is insane. This is why so many men of our current generation suffer with their wives and with women. Sometimes this is like I've been saying. I've been preaching this a lot. This is big advice. I have a lot of friends right now who are like fighting with their wives and all this stuff. I say, guys, it's okay. You don't have to be right. There could be an accusation and you could take the L. When someone's upset, you can just let them be upset, and most of the time they calm down. They're being irrational. Someone's jumping off a bridge. You don't say, it's 867 feet to the bottom. That's your body's gonna splatter. What do you say? Think about your kids. Think about your life. We love you. Anyway, but this is why so many great authors are never going to be, or I should say, never get off the ground, because we have David Foster Wallace here, you guys, and I have Infinite Jest right there next to my ear. That is a logical book. That is a winding book that at times is self-indulgent and navel-gazing, maximalist, and many other things. But there is a warmness to it. There is a heart. There is a message. Wallace walked down the stairs to us and greeted us. And at times, sometimes sections will go over your head, but then he always will bring it back and connect you back to the story. And the reason that so many people refuse to do this, and now we're getting deep here, is that to get this, how did David Foster Wallace get this ability? He had Broom of the System, Girl with the Curious Hair are great, but very cold. There are moments in Westward and Little Expressionless Animals and even the Lyndon B. Johnson story that have glimmers of a heart. But they are just these perfectly crafted stories. But it wasn't until he got humbled. It wasn't until he was in a halfway house working as a security guard and he couldn't read, he couldn't write anymore, and he had to interact with other people who were in a halfway house, most of which weren't going to Harvard and dropping out of Harvard, that he got humbled. And that's when his writing took a totally new turn, not just his fiction, but his nonfiction. And there are times when he goes logic bro. There are times when he condescends. If you read, like, he condescends David Lynch in the David Lynch essay. He calls, he is pretty condescending of some Midwestern people, which is hard not to do, in his State Fair essay or the cruise ship essay. But nonetheless, he had his own artistic renaissance when he gave that up. And it wasn't easy for him. When you look at his life and his abuse of Mary Carr and his transition from being this regimented individual to a more carefree, sensual individual, it isn't easy. And this is why people don't want to do it. Because if you want to do this process, what did David Foster Wallace have to do? He had to start believing in God. He had to go to meetings and interact with others. He had to admit that he was a drug addict and an alcoholic and wasn't as good as he thought. He had to stop overthinking. He had to do so many different things and start contemplating himself and his abuse and all the terrible things that he had done in his life. He had to do all of that. And all of us have that same path and that same opportunity. And all of us need to do it to individuate and become better individuals. But that path is filled with pain, endless pain. It's very hard to go through. I'm currently going through it. Many people never start or quit or build camp somewhere along the road and act like they're, done with the path. It's the path of opening up and not being totally inundated with the alphabetical pixel coded world. It's about actually focusing on human experience and connecting with others, which is irrational. And it's the disease, everyone, that the government wants. The government wants us to be sick. They want us to go to work and make money and logically figure out these problems. They don't want us to become ethical, conscious individuals, because if we all did, we wouldn't need a government. We wouldn't need to elect people who are morally superior to us to hold us under duress and with a force of gangsters with guns to follow their ethical codes because we would already be ethical. And this requires you to, when you become ethical, you give up manipulation, you give up lying. It's hard, you guys. You know, when I look back at my life, I'm not a saint. I've manipulated people before. I've told people I've been invested in relationships and friendships more than I was and burned them later. Like I'm sure many of you have, or you've been on the end of being burned. But to become ethical, to individuate, you have to leave that behind. So there's so many different things you have to leave behind that make life so much easier in the external, being just manipulating people, manipulating reality, making money, winning the game, not having to experience or touch any of your vulnerabilities. But I'm speaking to writers right now. I'm speaking to readers. And if you want to be good at this, that's what this is about. That's what it requires. A sattvic, a balanced state of logic and sensuality and a vision, an ethical guidepost or transcendent thing pulling us forward. Because without that, then we are lost. Logic bros are on tutorial island of RuneScape. They can't even get off the game. They're still fishing, bro. Because you say, objective morality? Objective morality doesn't exist. Good fucking job. Oh, exactly. I don't think there are a priori laws floating around necessarily. Wow, you really did a great job. But what are we going to have to do as a society to progress? What are you going to have to do alongside every other individual to individuate and create a more nonviolent world? Tap into objective morality. Tap into sensuality and charity and love and many of these other things. That's what you're going to have to do. The goal with our work, with life, that I'm pushing, I think everyone else would agree and should agree, is that we all need to reach a baseline of physical, emotional, spiritual, and mental intelligence. And that if we can do that and we help others do that, it would instantly change our reality in every single way. And that once you reach the baseline, we can, I'm okay with we can shame people. Okay. If there are people who are refusing to reach any of those baselines and they have had the opportunity for decades to do so, I can say, you suck. You are not as good as you should be because you are still volatile. You can still physically hurt others, emotionally hurt others, make mental mistakes with your calculations that would lead to duress. You have an immature conception of how things work in terms of spirituality. All of those things are very problematic and actually hurt others and hurt yourself. But once you reach that baseline, which isn't some crazy baseline, which anyone can do it, probably in a couple 100 hours for each category. Once you reach that, then we all are the same. We're just doing our own thing in the way we want to do it while not impeding on others. But right now, we are not at that. And unless we can say that there are people who aren't doing that, and they aren't, I don't know if the word is good, then we're not going to go anywhere. But this goes beyond mental intelligence. Wallace was looking at this problem from mental intelligence. So he showed up at that halfway house being this mental giant, but his physical, emotional, and spiritual self was lost. He physically couldn't overcome his body to get off drugs. He couldn't emotionally hold himself together or open up. He couldn't spiritually connect to something higher. And so we met people who were very connected to God, who were very connected to their inner selves, who were very connected to their body and had been sober and gone through this stuff. And then you realize, oh my God, I don't know anything. And so logic will hold you back in almost every single one of these categories. Even the physical. If you don't understand how you feel and you don't check in with how you feel and don't look at it from a logical way, if you don't have a resonance and correspondence with yourself and not just how workouts make you feel, but being around certain people and doing certain things and what you eat, all this stuff, how it makes your physical body feel, then you are once again volatile. And so, my friends, think on these things. I would love to see you in the Infinite Jest Book Club, which is happening right now. We are reading Infinite Jest over the next 5 months over on the Right Conscious Substack. We are also, or I should say, I am also publishing a David Foster Wallace course that has 10 hours plus in the Infinite Jest course. I am halfway done with the book. And then another 10 hours or so of me covering his essays. I would love to see you guys over there. I have free content on David Foster Wallace. One of my favorites, I think, is like David Foster Wallace on tobacco or something. That one's free. And I have all the paid content I just talked about. If you want to read some of my writing, I just released a really cool post over there detailing some of the books I'm releasing this year. And thank you guys for listening. Thank you guys for giving me an opportunity to hopefully reinforce what you already know or slowly guide you toward a higher alignment with whatever you are pursuing. And I will see you guys hopefully in the next video.